Broadcasting from Glasgow, Scotland. Welcome to the Caledonian Elixir. I'm your host, Vincent Lawler, and we should be broadcasting live to multiple platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter X, and Rumble, and now on Twitch. So, for all you Twitchers, welcome. But we've run into some technical issues, and I hope this will go up fine. We're also going up as a podcast on Spotify, so you can subscribe and follow our content there. And you can support us by buying me a coffee, donating at buymeacoffee/Caledonian Elixir. And there are links available on the YouTube and Twitter app. So welcome back, and I hope you're all well. I'm feeling better as we are entering autumn. I feel more comfortable in the colder months. You know, for all you returning viewers, you've heard me whine and complain when it's too humid in autumn. There's two seasons in Scotland, and that's autumn and winter. It's like an intermission of unbearable humidity. But anyway, for all you finding us for the first time, this show covers everything from politics to the paranormal, told with wit and true grit, with guests and callers uncensored. Now, today on the Elixir, we have a guest, Ellen King, on to discuss the occult, Saturnian symbolism, and hypnosis, and much more. And what we are about to discuss is important for those wanting to understand the power of occult symbolism and hypnosis and how its application affects our laws and the principles that govern humanity. Now, our guest is a scenic artist from Hollywood studio, a quantum healing hypnotist. So, without further ado, Ellen King. Hi, Ellen.
Thank you. Hi, Vincent. How are you?
I'm good considering the circumstances. It's got me a bit taken aback with all the gremlins in the system. You know?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're going to be dealing with much more of that kind of trouble.
No, don't tell me that. Don't.
Listen, I
I
have,
don't need to be demoralized any more than I am.
I have to say, honestly, it's a good idea to keep sage nearby your technologies. I have actually had to get out this sage on mine before when it starts really doing weird stuff. And I've taken screenshots of some of the strange phenomena that happens to my phone and my computer. And I have gotten a sage to sage it and it instantly stops. So that's just something to note. I mean, we're going into strange times for sure.
What I usually leave beside my electronic equipment is shungite because I know it absorbs EMFs. So I've got quite a lot of elite shungite laying around my house. And I know if you carry shungite around with it on a necklace with it touching your body, it can induce a form of detoxification. And I wore it for a while, elite shungite around my neck. And when you're detoxing, you can feel weak and stressed. It did induce that. And it's a powerful stone. It's a powerful mineral. Apparently, it's only found in, I think it's Russia. Have you ever heard of shungite?
Oh, I have a big chunk of it. Yeah, I'm very much aware of some of the frequencies of different things. So, and it's not only just the stone itself, it's the color specifically. You know,
Mm.
in art, we actually learn about the color frequencies and things, and black absorbs all colors,
Mm.
and white reflects all colors. So it's kind of like a push-pull kind of thing that we're
Mm.
dealing with. It's the yin and yang. So.
Yeah. And I was saying to you before we begun recording, one of the reasons I invite John is due to, I guess, a kind of synchronicity that I recently experienced when I was discussing with my friend the occult, and she has, I don't want to say she's got an obsession with it, but she definitely has a deep interest in the occult and symbolism. And then I guess as serendipity would have it, the YouTube algorithm recommended a video where you were describing Saturnian symbolism and the occult. However, before I get there, could you just describe your background?
Yeah, so I have been an artist all my life, but I've also been interested in all the strangest things like UFOs, mysteries. Anytime there was, that kind of unsolved mysteries or UFO phenomena or anything like that on TV as a child, I was glued to the TV. It was just something that I was always interested in, all the weird tales of the world. And so again, I've been an artist and a fine artist, but then I got into the movie industry back in 2009 here in Georgia and around Atlanta area. And I started listening to a lot of different videos because we work very long hours in the studios where, we've been doing things like Walking Dead and uh, feature films, Dumb and Dumber 2, like all kinds of movies I've been on. And I just started listening to the longest videos because we spent really long hours. I mean, 12, 14 hours a day. And then I got tired of listening to my own music and my iPod. So I would listen to UFO stories and different people like scientists talking about scientific studies, energy studies, spiritual things. I listened to Jordan Maxwell. I listened to people like Santos Bonacci, who talks about astrotheology. And, I really started getting an education and it started broadening my perceptions, I guess, of the world. But I was just being entertained, I thought. So in 2020, and all the lockdown and all the weird stuff happened, I kind of got a sense of what was actually happening based on all of the stuff that I had been listening to. And so also in 2020, my own inner voice, the inner wisdom said, hey, you know what? You really need to start your own YouTube channel and start talking about some of the things that you've been listening to. And I was the kind of person I didn't want to be on camera. I was like, oh gosh, that horrified me. I didn't want to be on, I didn't like public speaking or anything like that, but I tried my hand at it, because I just felt it was necessary to start tying some of these different subjects together because they are all connected by a silver thread. And once you start weaving it together, you start making a bigger picture about what's really going on in the world. And I believe Jordan Maxwell was one of the most profound people that I came across in his research about religions and also combining it with astrotheology. I started also looking into some of the books that he suggested and the people he suggested, and along with learning about magical practice and Jewish mysticism and all of these things, these occult things, like what is going on? My biggest question was what is going on in the world where these people who are in higher positions, higher paid positions, I would say, are, coming up with all of this stuff where they're doing rituals and you're hearing about the crimes that they're doing against humanity in general. And then you're questioning if that's real. Well, then you start going down those trails of, ancient reading these ancient grimoires and things of magical practice, like the Ars Goetia, for example, and some of these other things. And you're starting to realize that you're making connections on what these people have been into for a very long time. And I believe
Do
they've
you know what? Do you know what's one of the videos that I wanted to play? We can't play any videos today, but it was a short clip of Jordan Maxwell explaining um, the relationship between Saturn and Semitic religion.
yes.
So you were
So,
describing,
well, I'll
Max.
tell you, I've since I've been studying a lot of what Jordan Maxwell had to say, I saw with my own eyes. I've been able to see with my own eyes what he's been trying to refer to with a lot of this Saturn symbolism. So you cannot speak about this stuff without actually looking at a zodiac, one of the zodiac wheels. The zodiac wheel, I've found based on researching many different ones, I found that the zodiac wheel is actually a calendar clock that keeps time. It is the story of us. It's our story. And it's our story as we traverse through the 12 houses of the zodiac. And what he was basically aiming at was that we're going into a time that is ruled by Satan. And Satan is also known as Saturn, the adversary. And Saturn has gotten this name because Saturn is not what we've been told by NASA, at least based on my research. It is not what NASA and Hollywood have been trying to tell us about outer space, because outer space is all around us. See, what we have at the top of the world are those who worship and aggrandize the material plane. We have scientists who only focus on scientific studies, only on material ideas, and they don't really breach the subject of spiritual essence that actually is part of this whole concept of our reality. And I think that's why, Jordan Maxwell touched upon the topic of religion so much, is because he wanted people to start questioning the foundations and origins of religion. Because when you really start going backwards in time, that's where you find the essence of where we find ourselves today. And so, just like Jordan Maxwell, I started teaching myself about symbolic language through studying some alchemy symbols, studying the yin and yang, studying the 4 elements of alchemy, which is what the yin yang actually teaches, and then also going into the occult works of different grimoires, learning.
Were you researching this when you were working, say, on the set of The Walking Dead?
Yes. Yeah. So when I would come across different people who would suggest a book that they had read, I would go and I would look at the book and see if it was anything that pertained to something that I would want to know. And I have bought a lot of books from listening to just random videos. And some of the most profound books I have come across are things that teach you hermetics, for example. Like Franz Barden was a guy who lived in the early 1900s. He was teaching people the initiation into hermetics and teaching people how to use the 4 elements of alchemy inside themselves and to start using it outside themselves. Essentially what they call magic. It is not magic. Magic does not exist exactly. Magic is like a word that's used as a blanket term and kind of to put a spin of mystery on what is no other than mind over matter. And our minds are electric and our emotions are magnetic. And this is what can produce what's called magic. So it's based on intention, which is where the emotion part comes in, because you can either use good intentions or bad intentions. You can use fear or you can use love. So there's that spectrum.
Helen, see, as I'm looking at you, it looks like there's an aura or a mandala, a piece of art around your head. Did you design that? Is that your art? There's windows, and then around your head, it looks like there's a form of a halo or mandala. Is that?
That's just a backdrop that I have. I bought it some years ago, and I just hung it, and thought it was a nice.
It's a very interesting backdrop. It creates a sort of spiritual aura around your head, Um, but I'm aware that you've also got a background in hypnotherapy called quantum healing hypnosis, and I'm fascinated by hypnosis. I have a psychology and counselling degree that involved counselling theory and its applications, and I studied a lot of the literature of George Chesterbrooks, who was a U.S. military mind control scientist in World War II, responsible for creating a Manchurian candidate, or mind controlled assassin. When he was working with captured Japanese prisoners of war. So as far as I'm concerned, hypnotism is a special tool that tells us a lot about human consciousness and the brain. Uh, could you describe what quantum healing hypnosis is?
Yes, it's QHHT. It was developed by Dolores Cannon, and she was basically just a regular hypnotherapist, but she had one of her clients revert to a past life. And in hypnosis, if people don't know, you just kind of go with whatever is coming out of a person's experience, whatever they're seeing. And I believe that we need to demystify the word hypnosis. And it's essentially, when you're doing hypnosis, you're basically doing guided meditations. But with it, the inversion of that is where someone actually presses memories that are not yours into your consciousness. And they can do that through torture. And that's what they've been doing a lot with the MK Ultra and things of that nature. But with the quantum healing hypnosis, it's more aligned with beneficial practices to just ask many questions of your client and to get them to see and experience their own thoughts based in their own experiences, quite possibly from past lives or from the present, timeline, or even in future timelines. People can also see into the future. So this is what a lot of the different practitioners out here, like the sleeping prophet, Edgar Cayce, he was able to kind of do his own self-hypnosis, which is just his own meditation that was really deep. And he could pull information out from the Akashic records, essentially, and give people the
Is
information.
this a form of auto-suggestion that will trigger a form of...
Yes. And essentially what happens, this is how you also can channel information. So you can do this in a waking state, and you can sit quietly, center and balance yourself, and you become an open channel. But you have to make sure that you are aligned in your heart space with higher energy and higher planes of existence, so that higher entities can actually formulate words through your thoughts. I have done this before, and I really wanted to know some information, and I just sort of opened myself up, and I listened to some meditation music while I was doing this. So I was aligning myself with what they would call the light. And I wanted to just do some automatic drawing, but it started coming out as automatic writing. And I decided at the end of the session that I would just put it away and I wouldn't look at it until I felt the time was right to look at it. And when I did, it was about a week later. And what came out was so profound. I burst into tears because it was so beautiful. And I was just in awe of what had channeled through me, that I could not, I was writing so fast that I could not even keep up. And I couldn't think about what I was writing. I was just allowing the energy to channel down. So it can be used as a benefit, and it's not from demonic forces unless you're aligned with that.
Yeah, I mean, I on my channel, I have some videos I've made. It's solfeggio sounds in the backdrop, with what you described as guided meditation, in order to help myself and others who want to, click on the videos, sleep well, and also addiction therapy guided meditation videos. And they have improved my sleep. I suffered from sleep attacks for years, and I still get them intermittently, but they're nowhere near as bad. Um, so, how have you used quantum healing hypnosis exactly to improve your own life?
Oh my gosh. I can't recommend this enough, because as a child, I was traumatized coming into this life. I was traumatized to the point where I could not communicate with adults or anyone. I couldn't tell people about my innermost feelings. I was very fearful of this world. And at that time, I did not know why. Now, I suffered from childhood traumas and abuse, and it didn't start coming out until I was about 18 years old. And when I went to college, I studied psychology and I studied art, and I decided to go with art. That's why I ended up becoming an artist. But I later took Dolores Cannon's classes after I had watched her videos for about a year and a half. And I was fascinated, but I was also skeptical about this whole past life regression stuff. But something inside of me wanted to know more. So I decided to take the first class. Well, after taking the first class, what you do, you start practicing on other practitioners, and they practice on you. So you're sharing the different experiences and learning and growing. Well, it started coming out, and this is going to be fascinating for you because you live over there. But it started coming out that I was a warrior in my past life. And I was a warrior in what I sense was Ireland. And it may have been the cliffs of Moher. Is it Moher or a Moher? I don't know. Moher? Moher?
I'm in Scotland.
Yeah, no. Well, it was in
But
Ireland.
Scotland is right next to Ireland. I'm half Irish, half Scottish, to be honest. But
That's awesome. Yeah, I love the accent, by the way. Um, so it was over there in Ireland, and what looked exactly like the cliffs of Moher in Ireland is what I saw in my vision. And when I saw this vision, I started getting very unnerved. I was very upset. And this is during the hypnosis session. I didn't know why at the time that I was getting upset because I didn't see myself as a warrior in the beginning. But as we went deeper into the different transitions that you go through when you're doing a hypnosis session, I saw myself as a warrior. I was like a defender with four other large, burly men of a small clan of people, probably about 35 to 34 people. I don't know if it was less than 40 people in this small clan. And we were assaulted one early dawn before the sun came up. What felt like raiders, invaders, Vikings, I don't know. They waylaid my tribe of people, and I was one of the only ones left standing. And I felt so guilty that I threw myself off the cliff, and I landed on the rocks and into the water. So, I basically broke all my bones and drowned. Well, as a child in this life, I used to have nightmares of falling from a high place, and then I would have other nightmares of drowning. And I just assumed that everyone had these nightmares. But it wasn't until I took hypnosis that I found out, no, not everybody has those nightmares. So essentially what had to happen is that I needed to resolve this past life trauma that I had brought into this life. And this has gone for some of my other clients in my sessions too. They've had past life traumas that once they get resolved, then they even express to me how much better their lives have improved and that everything feels so much better and they can move forward. So this has been the same thing with my own life. It had to be resolved in that I had to go into the afterlife of that life and to see my brethren, who were my brothers in arms, standing before me. And if they held me accountable for their deaths, and they don't. I mean, nobody ever holds you accountable for something like that when it wasn't your fault. But I had carried that guilt into this life, and I was fearful, and I didn't know how to communicate. So once that was all resolved, it's almost like a big weight was lifted, and it shifted and changed the dynamic of my entire life.
And like if hypnosis sounds irrational to like some listeners, I'd like to remind them that scientist, that psychiatrist George Estabrooks, that I mentioned earlier, he used prisoners of war who suffered from PTSD back then, and back then it was known as shell shock. But these mind control scientists used hypnotism to implant post hypnotic suggestions. So in the hypnotic trance, the seeds of a new personality are essentially planted. A personality that would be loyal to, in this case, the allies. And in other words, inducing a form of distant identity disorder within the minds of captured prisoners of war, where their conscious minds would be none the wiser, that resting in the shadows of their psyche essentially was this um, nascent other personality that had swore an allegiance to the allies. So the power of hypnosis is very real.
Yes, absolutely. You can split people's personalities, like I said. So, one thing I do want to note, and I've been learning law since for several years actually. I've been listening to a lot of things, but I've really started diving in more recently into common law. But what I realize is that everything we do in this existence requires a contract. And one of the things that the dark forces are using is tacit agreements. And when we're talking about using this technology, for example, to listen to meditations, when we're listening to whether it's guided meditations or different videos and things of that nature that are being created with AI, or even just, average people, we need to be aware that they do use subliminal messaging in a lot of different ways.
Mm.
And it's best, especially if we're going to be doing our meditations and things of this nature, that we create our own music and that we create our own meditations, because they can be using things that we don't actually pick up on
Mm.
against us. And this can
Hey,
go.
Ellen, I'll give you a really good example of that. Not that long ago in the UK Parliament, the Women's Equality and Select Committee, there was a report, a submission by a Dr. McKay, and it was basically that pornography or a specific subgenre of pornography called sissy hypno, I think it was was inducing that form of distant identity disorder in viewers and is responsible for a certain number of men transitioning, becoming transgender. And this was being discussed in the House of Commons in this committee, that hypnosis, it was essentially using the power of hypnosis, erotic imagery, along with guided meditation to affect the minds of the viewers. And as you know, it's the power of suggestion. If you reinforce that suggestion over and over, again, with the power of the blue screen that you're staring at, and the erotic imagery that is going to produce a dopamine response in and of itself, uh, had is having a terrible effect. In fact, in the UK, they've recently banned access to porn sites because of the harm they think it's doing to children. You still can get on with a virtual private network, or if you can provide um, a passport identity, for example. But they are discussing how hypnosis utilized in pornography is responsible for um, changing people's sexuality, a form of conversion therapy in reverse, I think would be a good way of describing it. So again, it's another example of hypnosis being used as a form of modern warfare to destroy the minds of vulnerable populations.
Listen, so if you want to know the modus operandi of the enemy that is at our gates and on all of our lands right now, you need to look no further than inverted languages, inverted images, an inversion of all creation. They equate to the distortion and the destruction of creation. And if you study the yin and yang, you will get the basic premise that all creation must exist with its exact opposite. There's only that way. In this world, you must have balance. Because if we were to create, we would create ourselves out of existence too, because we would overcreate if we had nothing to destroy the creation. But these entities work heavily with sigil magic. Are you aware of sigil magic?
In a very general way, so if you could elaborate.
Sigil magic essentially is radionics, and it's about radionic fields of sacred geometry,
Oh,
shapes.
hold on a minute. What's radionics? Elaborate on that one.
Radionics is essentially the study of invisible fields of light energy, because that's when you're talking about radiation, you're talking about either light or you're talking about magnetism.
Right, right, okay,
That's
okay.
So with radionics, though, there's a whole science, what they call pseudoscience. Is not pseudo. Nothing in this existence is pseudo. Of creating different forms of metals and shapes and objects that can either radiate with a beneficial energy or radiate through harmful energy. And again, let's just stop right there. Let's go to the basis of all reality. The basis of all this reality is sound. Sound is the beginning of everything. Sound creates light, and then light creates form. And when you get into alchemy, you'll start really, comprehending this whole science. And science has even proven this with the double slit experiment. They're, showing that when you focus your attention on an object, it starts to cohese. When you don't pay attention to an object, it's sort of like the microns and things, the atoms are just sort of free floating in space. The scientists have been catching up with all of this, how reality actually works and the fabric of it all. So when you're talking about radionics, you're talking about sigil magic. And sigil magic goes into the alchemical symbols of old alchemy combined with, I guess, knowledge of dark forces. It's all to do with the alignments of the stars. Everything, even our written language, is based on the science of the stars and the energy of the stars. I came across information on this where somebody actually put the Phoenician letters, and they're arranged according to the celestial constellations and the shapes that they are. So they put them in a pattern and then they rotated them, and it started forming the letters that we use in our English language. So this essentially is why I say, like, astrotheology is the root foundation of all things in existence. It's the spiritual sciences. And we have a death cult that worships Saturn.
Well, do you know what? Like, okay, right. So let's shift this conversation to the subject of Saturnian symbolism, because again, like, Saturn's influence is so vast and multi-layered,
Yes.
From mythology, astrology to modern culture. So could you just as you were beginning there, just
Well,
describe.
yeah. So if you get into, again, astrotheology basically covers astrology. And if you start studying astrology and you start studying the attributes of Saturn and Aquarius, and then you look outwardly at the world, then you're going to start noticing the similarities. So Aquarius is an air sign. Let's start there. Aquarius is an air sign, which means that it's going to harness and utilize the element of air. Again, it goes into alchemy. We're talking about the 4 elements. We're talking about air, fire, water, earth. Air and fire are electric. That's the yang principle. Water and earth are the yin principle, which is magnetic. Now, the air sign, you can look outwardly in the world. Let's look at some examples. Elements of air. What do we have? We have the technology that we're using. We have a non-tangible technology because you can't touch what is us inside the video screen. It's kind of, dominated by the principle of air because it doesn't have a tangible existence. Then we're going into the digital currency, which is a non-tangible currency, unless it's going to be, I do sense it's going to be backed by assets. It's going to be backed by silver and gold. Some of them will. That'll eventually come out, and I'll tell you why in just a little bit. But the non-tangible currencies, we have all of the different, the technology, again, with the phone, that's not really talking to a person right in front of you. It's sort of in the air somewhere. It exists outside of yourself. And then we have the metaverse versus the metaphysical notion. So the Age of Aquarius is all about ideas. It's about concepts of reality. It's about imagination. It's about illusions. It's about all these other things to do with air. We're also going to have vehicles that can fly. I shouldn't call them vehicles because a vehicle is a corporate owned thing. But we'll have different transportation where we can fly. We have drones that fly. We have the Project Bluebeam, Bluebeam, that's a light. So that's in the air as well. So lights in the air. We're learning about spiritual practices. This is where the metaphysical versus the metaverse. The metaverse is the world inside the computer to trap your mind and to lock it there in time and space. But then the metaphysical is going to teach people about themselves and their own innate abilities to be able to work with their spiritual aspects. And so the wheel of time called the zodiac expresses all of this. And I have one specific wheel that I turn to that literally I can look at it based on its symbolic language and go, oh my gosh, this is where we are. This is why Satan and Jesus are squaring off for the battle of the age, is because Satan is Saturn and Jesus is the sun. And on the zodiac wheel, they sit directly across from each other. So Saturn rules Aquarius and Capricorn.
So you think Jesus is a metaphor for our sun?
If you go into what,
I have heard that before, but I was just that's what you think.
well, again, if you go into what Jordan Maxwell was trying to express, he's even done so much biblical research. He said he could not find a man named Jesus. It didn't exist. And the letter J did not exist. So what he did.
Didn't the Indians call him Isa? But they believed Saint Thomas traveled to India, and there's a temple dating back from the first century AD that is believed to have been visited by Saint Thomas. And I've read the Gnostic Gospels, and I love I don't love it, but I'm a great fan of the Gospel of Philip because it has really influenced my Christian thinking. Um, the notion of what a living God is, and I think that's a very important statement. The living God, and why do we refer to Christ as a living God? And it is explained in the Gospel of Philip, where he says, I shall write my name on their heads, and they shall be no more. And he's describing freeing the ego, the dissolution of the Christian into becoming an awakened one, dissolving their own personality and becoming another Christ. And this is something that just goes on from generation to generation. Therefore, Christ never dies. He is a living God that passes on through the generations because we share a form of Christ consciousness that never passes on. And for some reason, that understanding of Christ that resonates with me. I understand also there is that relationship with you know the, with astrology and the planets and the sun, with the tetragrammation that Jordan Maxwell was describing about the tetra representing the four letters, the name of God, and the grammation, the grammar, and Aton, the sun. Um, but personally, the Gnostic interpretation that's found in the Gospel of Philip and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene personally just resonates with me.
And so essentially what it comes back to is each of us. It's inside of us. This is the whole notion. When you really start studying the zodiac and astrotheology, it will start sinking in. And then you go into the way the Bible was written and realizing that each of the characters are found in the zodiac. And they were describing not only the planets, but they were describing the constellations. It's almost like they had to relabel them something else in order to prevent, quite possibly, that whole the conquest that they were doing with the Inquisition and all of that. They were stomping out knowledge. They were killing people for their astrological knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
This is what has really been happening. And if you go into all of these stories that are spoken of around the world, we're talking about the Gnostics, we're talking about even the Vikings, like over there with the Norse cosmology, and then all the cosmologies around the world had a different story, but with a similar context. And then they even have the notion of the firmament that they describe in different ways. I have the different images from around the world of the different cosmologies from all these different countries and these different nations. And it's almost like they had the same concepts, but they would explain it in a different way. But it really goes,
Ellen, sorry for interrupting. Are you aware of a man called Armin Hellman?
I don't think so.
He's a classicist. He's a Greek classicist, so he studies the original um, Greek texts in their original Greek. So, for example, the Bible in the original Greek, and his interpretation that a Christ, the derivation of that word was a christening. It described someone that was awakened, usually in ancient Greek, awakened by using a drug. And there is a specific scene in the Garden of Gethsemane. I think it's in the book of Mark, it's either Mark or Matthew, where Jesus is caught with a boy. It's when the guards, the Roman centurions, the guards arrive, and the and Jesus is caught with a boy who has a linen cloth around his lower part, but apart from that, he's naked. And the linen cloth falls, and the little boy runs away. And the guards set upon Jesus, and Jesus Christ says, "Why do you come across me like I am a lestes?" Which in Greek means a robber. And so the context of that is that Jesus Christ is with a child who is almost naked. And Armin Hellman, these classicists described this as a drug ritual, and that their interpretation of Christ is that he was an awakened one who used certain substances, and this was a practice again that was widespread back, and in that time. He's an interesting guy, Armin Hellman.
Yeah,
His
well,
ideas seem out there at first, but he is a treasure house of knowledge um that a lot of people that I've came across are just, because he's a classicist, he has read the original texts, and as you know, with translations, a lot of the original meanings get lost.
yes. And that's really what we're dealing with, with the great fall of man. The astrology wheel explains it at the end of the age of Aries, which was just before the age of Pisces. And that's what we're leaving right now is the age of Pisces. So we've kind of started over in our world circuit around the 26,000 year cycle.
Mm.
But a
You know,
lot,
I was amazed when because I heard you discuss this on another show, and I was amazed when I learned that there was a shadow in the North Pole of Saturn, or I should say, a hexagon shaped storm in the North Pole of Saturn. How and it was referred to also as a orthogonal projection that could also, that is when a cube casts its shadow and it appears as a hexagon. And as you know, you have all these geometric shapes like the cube and the hexagon that is connected to Saturn. And that's incredible because when we're talking about the relationship between religions to the astral bodies, the planets. And as you know, you have the hexagon on the Star of David on the flag of Israel. The ancient Semitic people described their god as El, that was associated with Saturn. You have the Elohim, the give me another example. The elect,
well, let's
the
go, let's
Yale,
go,
Israel. You've got all these examples.
yeah, let's go over this very quickly because Saturn has many names or appellations, we should call them. Names, a name is a claim of ownership. But Saturn's appellations are Satan, El Elyon, he's the Grim Reaper, Father Time, Chronos, he's Metatron. He is so many things. He's also the Sandman, ruler of Dreamland, and it keeps going. Like you, I
Could you describe me how why Saturn is described as Satan?
because
What's the relationship
he's
there?
considered the adversary in your
Right.
natal chart, even in your astrological zodiac natal chart. Saturn is usually your adversary. He's the challenger. He's the one who will challenge you and all that are in this existence. And essentially, from a spiritual perspective, which is where you basically go when you start studying the zodiac and you start looking at Saturn from a different perspective, other than what we've been taught through NASA and Hollywood, which are owned and controlled by the elitists, by the way. So Saturn eats his children. We are considered children of Saturn because when we die, our body doesn't go up to the heaven. Our body stays in this existence, in this 3D existence, and it goes back to the earth. We consider the earth the main mother of all things here, but it's actually Saturn's world of time and space.
Mm-hmm.
And when we leave time and space, we're no longer bound to time and space. We are free to roam throughout the ether and the Akashic records and even the rainbow bridge that's connected to us. This goes into the Norse cosmology a little bit. So it's a very, very deep hole to study Saturn. But if you start studying the attributes, get the book. Actually, you can go online and look up the book, The Cult of the Black Cube. You can find that on archive.org and you can read it. I paid $75 for the book, but then I found it online for free. And there's a lot of these books online for free on archive.org. But you will start getting a sense that Saturn's much bigger than what we've been made to believe, because they don't want us to know spiritually what it represents. Because if you can control someone's perception of the world and hold them and bind them to only thoughts of the material plane, then you can rule over them, even though no man or woman is supposed to ever rule over another, ever. This is in the teachings of every spiritual practice in the indigenous cultures, even with Jesus. That's why Jesus, purportedly, the man that they created, went around preaching all of these better things, like he was constantly on the move. He wasn't just sitting in one place trying to study in a cave or something. So Saturn, the greatest aspect of Saturn is beneath us. And I say that because once you learn from alchemy that Saturn's metal is lead, and that lead is actually what they are calling crude oil that they've been pumping from the ground and releasing into the atmosphere through our vehicles that we drive, and then put into the plastics that we use and the products, all the different products, all the paints, all the food products, like even pharmaceuticals use this
I know,
petroleum.
Ellen. I just drank from a plastic bottle. Don't remind me. But honestly, I've been aware of the black cube of Saturn on a subconscious level for most of my life, and it's always been there in the media. Someone who has worked in the media, you will understand how important observation and perception is. It's there in corporate logos. I take film, for example, in 2001: The Space Odyssey, in that classic scene where the primates engage with the monolith. And the monolith doesn't teach the primates anything, but what it does instead is it triggers something in them. And the monolith represents that transition from chaos to order, uh, just like Saturn does. He's the god of order, the god of law. And in Star Trek, there is a race called the Borg, a cybernetic race that again travels and exists within a cube, a collective consciousness that contains within it the boundaries and limitations of the cube. and and those within the cube lose contact with the natural universe, assimilated into an artificial system without the boundaries and limitations of the cube. And again, isn't that connotations of Saturn again? Limitation and boundary. He is the deity that sets those boundaries and limitations.
You are inside, all of us are inside Saturn's time and space module,
Yeah.
essentially. That's what we're doing here. Our bodies are Saturnian, and man's body is the measure of the universe. So you could actually kind of go over your body and you'll see the constellations and then the planetary aspects. But here's the thing to note about the media and entertainment, what we call movies and film. The ones who worship Saturn, and I'm not going to call them out right now, but I usually do on my own channel. The ones who worship Saturn worship the material plane. They worship all things of the material plane because Saturn equates to the material plane. They don't want you to know about these spiritual planes because you can leave this existence. And if you know how to leave this existence, they won't have something to feed on. But they use the media, they use the news outlets to tell you lies sold as truth. But then they use the movies to tell you truth sold as fiction. So they work through inversion. And once you get this, that's how they speak, then you can go back and start looking at all these old movies and how they're actually telling you everything you need to know about Saturn. They're actually snubbing their nose at us when they show you monkeys staring at a black cube trying to figure out what it is. They're talking about us because we haven't figured it out yet. And they're laughing at us for our ignorance. And this is why I say, you just study a little bit of alchemy, starting with the basics of yin and yang, and then branching out into some of the alchemy symbols, and then over into some of the astrology from the astrology wheel of the zodiac. You'll start connecting dots. And, these princes of darkness who are allowed to rule based on the zodiac even tells us this, that the princes of darkness will rule during this epoch and during the age of Capricorn. And that through the symbolism, what we can see in the Aquarius, there's two little wave signs for the symbol of Aquarius. What are we learning? We're learning frequencies. That's exactly what these little symbols are because it's an air sign. But then we have a human, whether it's male or female, pouring water from a vessel. What does it mean? It means all of the waters of memory are being restored at this time. Then you go into Capricorn, Capricorn being ruled by Saturn. Capricorn is a land creature, which is goat. It's the front half of a goat with the tail end of a water serpent. What does that tell me in symbolic language? It tells me that it's a hybrid being and that hybrids will become the main dominating force during the age of Capricorn. We're already seeing it now where they're starting to work with genetics to create alternate creatures. That's already being done in labs, glowing rabbits and all kinds of stuff. I've seen this stuff in science. So if you go into the zodiac wheel, very important, very, like this is what really slapped me.
Ellen, in terms of the zodiac or this, or do you identify with any symbol, any of the zodiac? Do you identify with that on a personal level? You give the attributes that are associated with these astral deities, the zodiac. Do you personally identify with any?
Well, if you want to be of the light, you'll follow the light of the sun, which is in Leo. But for myself, my sun sign is Aquarius. And
you identify with Aquarius and Leo?
Well, let's just say this. I mean, I can do a share screen. I can just show you some stuff real quick. I don't really identify. I identify as myself. I don't really carry labels.
What I should mean is you resonate with the attributes of those constellations or with those those bodies.
So I tell you,
these concepts that we're working with. And do you know the only reason I brought this up is I was not that long ago reading the Astavakra Gita, and I'm sort of in a crossroads between the teachings of Eastern esotericism that teaches not to identify with our thoughts and concepts and ideas and things of the material universe and just exist within the pristine light of consciousness and enjoy existence if you can.
Yeah,
And those of the Western mystical teachings that are a lot more material based and there's a lot more symbols and sigils and you're working with a lot more concepts there and there's more identification and I'm constantly evolving and changing as I age with in terms of how I see myself and the world around me. And that's why I was asking if you identified with anything there.
I can't say that I identify with it, but what I've seen is that the energy that I've come into this experience with absolutely overlaps with what is spoken of as the characteristic traits of an Aquarian, for example. And
Right.
what I gather, because you're talking about the great work of alchemy, if you look into the great work of alchemy, it's about not identifying as, Ellen King or Vincent or whatever, not to identify with that, but to just become something greater and to become a part of a whole collective. That's including nature and all of the animals. It's more like even tapping into Buddhism, where you see yourself in all things.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been able to do this. It's what we're doing is we're projecting.
Mm-hmm.
We project our thoughts onto this existence. And then the world reflects back to us whatever those thoughts are. And we feel like we become something other than the things that are of nature, for example, which is where we really should be putting our focus, because the natural world is what sustains us.
I really do personally resonate with the idea of non-duality. And though it can be difficult to maintain that sense of that feeling of oneness with nature, because as you know, you have to go about your life engaging with other people, with institutions, with society, where you are treated as an individual or as a corporate entity, it's part of existence. So I feel at times I can achieve that through meditation for a period of time, but then when I have to once again engage with the world around me, I lose it. It's only there for a fleeting moment. It's like again, you hear it. We're all apertures of the divine, the universe or God looking or trying to understand itself, and yeah, it's hard to maintain it. I guess that's what I'm trying to
It
convey to you.
is. And, ultimately, in the spiritual aspect of things, we chose this moment to come and experience the binary essence of things, to be able to comprehend the darkness and the light and to see them being polarized before our very eyes, because that's exactly what's happening. So Saturn equates to the black hole, which is what we call the black cube. The sun equates to the light of the world. So what we have are night and day that are facing off on the zodiac wheel. And I can show you this. I want to show you this because this is going to be kind of important. I pulled this up. I just want to show you this because it's going to reveal some things about this zodiac wheel that most people don't consider. Number one, the zodiac wheel contains all the crosses ever known in existence. And where we reside, we're over here, leaving the age of what's known as Pisces, right over here on the left, and going into the age of Aquarius that's descending on this wheel. We're descending further into a dark winter phase. This is the iron winter of consciousness. This is why so many people seem to be walking around like zombies because we're in the dark winter of consciousness.
What
Now,
does that mean to you, the dark winter of consciousness?
dark winter of consciousness is the unknown. It's the subconscious mind. It equates to subconscious reality. They're not really conscious of who they are and where they are in space and time. They're just operating on autopilot, and they're just following whatever design is out here that they think that they're supposed to follow. They're not really
Would
coming
you
in.
also not describe that as as a problem or as a form
No,
or
no,
even
no,
as a
no,
pathology? Like when you
no.
lose touch with your subconscious, when you're overly conscious.
It's actually not a problem. What we're trying to express, especially during this meeting that we're having, is the differences between different types of spiritual experiences. So, I don't know why this button is, click that thing off. So when I'm talking about people who are walking around unconsciously, it's not to attack them or to judge them in any way. Like I don't ever judge anyone where they are on their journey because you can't.
Mm.
Different souls came here for a different experience. This is why you can't force someone to listen to what you have to say. You know, whether you're trying to express something to try to help them with their great awakening, you cannot do it because it's not their time. They will activate in their own time because they came here for a specific reason and to learn specific things in their journey. So, but in essence, what we have is Satan is over here. This is Saturn. It's upside down. It looks like an H, but it's supposed to represent a scythe. These are also symbols that are found in alchemy, like this symbol for Aquarius, which is this little squiggly line that's basically frequencies. That's a symbol that's found in alchemy, and there are 12 alchemy symbols, and they are all found on this wheel of time, which tells me something so much greater than most people can even fathom, that we are being honed and alchemized in an alchemy lab for souls to have these spiritual experiences, whether we're awake or asleep or whatever we're doing. No matter what it is, we are being honed like a sword to either grab onto the concepts of light or to grab onto the concepts of dark, as expressed in the center of the wheel with the yin and yang symbol.
Mhm.
Now, directly across and opposite from Satan, the devil, Saturn, the adversary, is Leo, ruled by the sun. This is the sun, and that's a symbol that you'll find in alchemy that represents gold and the sun. The Leo sign over here with the little round thing with the tail, that's found in alchemy. And all of those little symbols for each house of the zodiac, you will find in the alchemy processes for everything to do with alchemy. You will also find those alchemy processes in the 12 steps inside of our body. Very, very important. Why are there 12 houses to the zodiac? 12 alchemy processes found inside and outside the body with 12 hours in the day, 12 hours in the night, 12 tribes of Isis, Ra, and El, which is Israel. They're talking about who gets to rule each astrological age during a specific time period. Right now, we have the tribes of Isis, Ra, and El, which is Israel, that are worshiping Saturn. And they will worship him for the next 4,000 years because he will rule in a straight timeline manner. He will rule for the next 4,000 years, just a little bit more than 4,000 years.
Right. Let me go back to the idea that the Semites and the Canaanites they worshipped El, who is associated with Saturn. Am I correct? Yes.
Yes,
At
yes,
the same time, were the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians at that point, worshipping Aton, the sun god.
yes,
So both groups were worshipping different astrological objects,
yes,
deities.
yes.
So, and as we know, the Canaanites were, they existed in Egypt at the time. There was a massive migration of Canaanites into Egypt. Is it as simple as you have this melting pot of different nations, different peoples, such as the Egyptians and those who we are describing as the Semites, the Canaanites, and they're both looking up into the heavens, looking at different astrological bodies and identifying one as a god and the other as an adversary?
Yes. So what we have are the people who follow the light and people who follow the dark. Now, one thing to note when you get into astrology, there's a light side and a dark side to every planetary body. And that means that there's good attributes and there's bad attributes. There's good and evil in everything, but it's not really good and evil. It's what your perceptions are. And right now, our perceptions are being hijacked because if everyone could stop outwardly projecting their concepts of reality out on the world and just hone it back in and work on themselves and be better people, just like what Jesus was teaching, the world would shift into a new dynamic because we collectively, as a whole, are projecting our chaotic thoughts out onto what is basically a screen, which is what Saturn represents. Saturn represents a dark screen, and the light that we imbibe through the consciousness of the sun and collectively all of the planets, it projects outwardly and creates what we call reality. And this is how you can hijack time and space. You can actually, flip through different frequencies and create a time machine and be able to visit alternate universes. But we are supposed to be able to do this with our own bodies. So that kind of gets, that goes off into another subject.
It really interests me again because as we are describing the differences between the ancient Canaanites and the ancient Egyptians, and the role that Saturn plays between both of those nations, it, I know this is a loaded question, so I'm not going to ask it. But therefore, does that is there that implication, that illusion that the Hebrews, not the Jews, because they weren't Jews at the time, as you know, there wasn't
Yeah.
the Talmud or anything like that, but the ancient Hebrews worshipped Satan. And you don't need to answer that because again, it's a loaded question.
I'm going to answer that question in just one moment. I'm going to close this screen in just a second, but I just wanted to finish up by pointing out the Knight Templar cross that you will see. If you go straight across to the sun, where Jesus and Satan are facing off, and then you go up to Taurus and then down to Scorpio, you essentially get the Knights Templar cross of energies that are being used in this battle of souls that we are witnessing to this day. And I'll let you guys digest that thought. I'm going to go ahead and close this though, so that way we can continue, looking at each other instead of at a wheel. I just need to get over to my screen. There we
And
go.
again, when you unfold a box, a cube is a cross,
Yes, yes, yes,
But
yes.
then, but then, you could look at Islam and you've got the Kaaba stone and the and Mecca,
Yes,
which is the
Mecca.
yeah.
Because, okay, so let's go into this. I'm going to go ahead and give you what I see with my occult eyes and symbolism is that the Muslims will rule the age of Aquarius, even though they've not stated such.
Well, we
And
definitely do have a demographic leg up over, Christians and
if you,
Jews.
if you have the eyes to see where's the greatest and grandest allure of money coming from, also the fact that they have already deemed their robot Sophia as a citizen. They've already given her citizenship status. I haven't heard of that anywhere else in the world. They're also creating a line in the sand, the future city called the Line. I'm like, oh, that the line in the sand, that's kind of like, in your face. And that it's connected to Neome, like Neo in the Matrix,
Mm,
Neome, the 100% operated artificial city that's going to have a huge wall, essentially a mirrored wall in the middle of the desert,
mm.
um, for a future timeline. They're going to rule the Age of Aquarius through China because they want what they've done with the model of China and the control that they have there through the social credit system is going to be the model for the entire world that uses and embraces the technology.
Right, so when you say through China, you mean the technology or the applications that the Chinese government use
Like
will be
what?
utilized by Saudi Arabia in order to usher in this Middle Eastern dominated
Yeah.
civilization or era, eon.
Essentially, it's going to be controlling the population to obey and comply and to be good even when you don't want to be good, like you want to speak out, you want to speak your truth. They're going to have this social credit thing in operation so that they can control your language, your speech, your emotions, suppress them. Because if you speak outwardly about government, and they've already been doing testing this on Facebook and other social media platforms.
But Ellen, it's already in a sense been rolled out here in the UK. So there's this new sort of pilot scheme um, where prisoners will be let out of prison and repeat offenders, they won't go to prison. Instead, they will be tagged and they will have a kind of social credit system where they will not be allowed to go to the bar or a nightclub or travel outside their community if they infringe upon certain, you know, um, regulations or like for example, if they have um, assaulted someone in a specific area, community, they won't be allowed to go near that community. And if they do, they will have some of their freedoms taken away from them. I know it's not the social credit system, but again, they're using currency uh, as a form of control by taking it away if you break their rules and provide them more if they go along with our rules. So instead of going to prison, you will be offered that as a alternative. And I think that's kind of interesting because it is a pilot scheme, and if that is successful, you can definitely foresee a future where we're outrolling similar to the general public.
And whose energy are we talking about? We're talking about Saturn right now. We're talking
Yeah.
about Saturn's energy because Saturn rules the Age of Aquarius. So when I talk about how the zodiac is our story, these energies of these planetary rulers flow through each of us. And we align with those energies to either be the dominating force or the subordinate force. And we came into this grand scheme to play these parts, these character roles. But essentially, again, in the great work and in the spiritual teachings in the greater places of the world, like Tibet and India, where they're teaching people about their spiritual nature, it's about not embracing that dualistic role, not really engaging and seeing the world from that lens, to walk in the center. But in order to traverse this plane that's coming online right now, we're going to have to figure that out. Like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get past all of these obstacles and still remain a sovereign soul? Like, how are we going to imbibe the Ka and the Ba, which is what they were teaching in Egypt? They were teaching that people have a shadow self and a light self. and to integrate both, to walk that middle line, find that middle pillar, and to be in the balance of all of the chaos. That is the main goal of all the teachings here.
Okay, well, those energies may be being channeled by some, and it is pervasive throughout our consciousness, our reality, such as the dominant energies of Saturn now. But I've heard you reference a dark brotherhood, or what I've described in previous episodes as a cartel or syndicate that essentially is using the powers of science and technology to, and short of a better word, enslave humanity. Utilizing the electromagnetic spectrum, radiation, toxic processed foods. Who do you, if you were to describe the Dark Brotherhood, who they are, where they are, what they really are, how would you describe them?
They're the cult of the black cube. They worship and aggrandize Saturn and the material plane. They essentially come from underground. A lot of their cohorts come from underground. I don't know if you know the origins of Tartaria, but
I've heard of the Tartarian civilization that apparently was a civilization that existed where the Russian Federation is today.
Yeah, it's right where Ukraine sits, actually. So if you go into the occult research of the different words, the Tartarus was a place that was said to be underground. And then you find an old map that talks about a land called Tartari, which is spelled with Tartari. And when you look up the etymology of Tartar, it means strong thief. And this is where I'll come in with what you had asked me earlier about the Hebrews. Go into the etymology of the word Hebrew, Jeru, which is Jeru, like for Jerusalem. Then go into GYP and Jew, Jew. And you will find that they all mean swindler, every single one of them. Hebrew comes from a word that was originally Hebe, Hebe. And it evolved over time that these people were thrown out of every nation that they ever tried to sort of take up root in. And even Israel was founded. If you listen to Jordan Maxwell, he talks about how it took them 7 different locations before they actually were given the land in Palestine. The Rothschilds and the British, I think they approached the Queen over there, and she wasn't English, by the way. She was German.
Yeah.
She gave them the land over in Palestine. They said, just go over to Palestine because they're just farmers. They don't have any, way to fight you off. Just go grab some land over there and establish Israel. And they did so through the Balfour Declaration. So, we have not really studied all of this stuff. Being over here in the Western society, they don't teach us this stuff in school about the history of Egypt and all of these other places. They just tell us a story about these places. And we're
If I can just interrupt here, most of the 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 inhabitants of modern day Israel, they're not Sephardic Jews, they're Ashkenazi Jews. Most of them originated either from Eastern Europe or from North America, predominantly North America in the last 20 years. Before that, Eastern Europe. And I think something like 7 out of the 9, I may be wrong, but I think it's 7 out of the 9 prime ministers of Israel have been Ukrainian in descent, and they have to change their surname. It's very interesting why a population as a nation is established in the Middle East but has its origins, its heritage in Eastern Europe.
Well, again, when you go back to the zodiac wheel, you realize that the princes of darkness are allowed to rule during this time. We're in the Kali Yuga. If you go into the Vedic knowledge, the Kali Yuga cycle means that we're descending. We're descending down this sine wave of energy into the Age of Aquarius and then down to the Age of Capricorn, and we won't start balancing out until we get to the Age of Sagittarius. But the Vedic astrology is a little bit different in the fact that they study the constellations as a whole, and it's a lot more detailed than the Western. The Western is based on seasonal cycles, which, you know, I can pick this up if you just start noticing the day, how it traverses into night in a seasonal cycle, and then your meal is like a seasonal cycle. Then we have the month calendar, that's the seasonal cycles, and then the grand year cycle is also a season of cycles, and then your life is also in seasonal cycles. So this is going back into alchemy, but you know, just going into the whole Tataria thing, and there's a book, it's called the Aura Linda. It's Oeralinda. The Aura Linda. I'm going to look this up online because I just came across this video today. This guy is describing how the Tartarians essentially were kicked out of different nations. And again, Tartar means strong thief. And then Hebrew, Jeru, Gyp, and Jew all mean swindlers. So what are we dealing with, really?
Is there a cross-cultural connection there, or are you saying we're the same nation, we're the same people, just described with a different descriptor?
Again, this kind of ties into, we shouldn't be donning labels and names and titles and such, because we're only one world people. And we either align ourselves with the ones who are doing good, or we align ourselves with the ones doing bad. But they wanted to divide.
It would help to have a bit of historical context and accuracy to understand if we are all, not we, but we are in this case, but they are referring to the same people, the same nation, but we're just using a different language or just using a different descriptor. Like for myself, I thought the Tartarians, like Tartar, was a nation of people within the Russian Federation. As you know, like Russia's the largest nation on earth, and we have so many nations within its borders. I thought the Tartars were a people that existed today in Russia.
Well, remember how it used to be the USSR? You remember how, like, even in our lifetime, we've noticed how these countries seem to change names over time. There's a reason for that. It's a reason for conquest and alignment, because remember, to name something is to claim ownership of it. And when you start looking at the world continents and the world countries, and you go into old maps, and you realize that conquest is constantly happening. No matter what time period you find yourself in, there's always some kind of quiet conquest, or there's something going on. But everything that we have right now is being turned into a corporation owned by corporate entities. And here's the definition of a corporation. A corporation is a dead legal fiction by definition. And a corporation has no power or authority over the living man and woman, save for the power that we give it. What are we doing when we're agreeing to all the terms and conditions to use this corporate designed metaverse platform to interact with each other on? We're giving consent to contract to terms and agreements. They're creating a world, a virtual world that we don't own or control, but yet it's going to dominate everyone's life if we give over our consent to use it and to contract with it, being the corporate empire of darkness that is contained within the black cube of Saturn. Your phone is a black cube. Your computer is a black cube. Your TV is a black cube. And what does it do? It magnetizes your attention, your awareness, your consciousness, because that's what magnets do. And it's a black scrying mirror to divine into the past, the present, and the future. We do that now when we're looking in our phone and looking up dates and times and locations and all kinds of stuff.
So what are we doing now then? Are we utilizing that same magic, that same technology to benefit us? I use it against them because we're describing this something that we are connoting with negativity or harm, but yet we're using it ourselves.
Yes, because we want to get the message out. I know where my heart resides. My heart resides in the fact that I can disconnect from any of this technology at any point and realize that I don't need any of these things of a material nature except to go out and to harvest food, to wear the clothes that I have, and to find some sort of shelter. And believe me, survival skills have been in the back of my mind to leave this world of technology behind. But again, we come in to volunteer for these experiences as a soul. We do not remember or recall that contract. We don't remember those agreements, but we come here. But when you listen to a lot of these different hypnosis sessions where people are past life regressions or other lives that they've existed in, and then they see themselves, even the people that have died and come back into this existence, they describe an entirely different world separate from this one. And that they chose this moment to come in and to help others to awaken to who they truly are and to remember their divine connection to this other plane of existence. And this even goes into what Plato describes as the allegory of the cave, where they see the shadows on the wall and they think that's reality and that's all there is, but that there's this other world that exists outside the cave. And somebody comes back into that shadow world with the cave and they say, hey, look, there's another world out here, and they don't believe them. That's exactly what we're doing today.
See, I envy that power to disengage with technology. And I don't know what it is with me. I mean, when I have a smartphone, I have, I feel like I have a lack of power. I feel like I'm disempowered in some way. Like, have you ever heard of a man called Mo Dallas?
Is Modius?
Mo Dallas.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Mo Dallas was in the Jewish mafia, and he was responsible for setting up the first casinos in Las Vegas, but before the Italians came in. And Mo Dallas, his casinos were the first casinos to have the one-eye bandit machines.
Mhm.
And the CIA got very interested in this because back then they had never witnessed this, where American citizens would come into a casino and would sit in a seat and just pull this lever for 6 hours a day, 10 hours a day. And they realized that they were utilizing this technology, the blue screens that was emanating from the one eye bandits,
Yeah, the blue
and it
light.
was entrancing them. And
Yes.
so the DARPA got a hold of that technology and utilized it and incorporated it into a lot of the screens we have today. But when I'm confronted with the screen, personally, whether it's a smartphone, whether it's a laptop, I can lose myself. I can lose hours and hours. So that ability, if you can just disengage and grow your own food, and again, and just keep your mind and your body fresh and clean. I mean, I envy that power to disengage that way.
Well, here's the thing. Again, souls come in for a specific reason. Some of us came to engage with the AI and to learn from it and to use it as a beneficial tool. And some will come, just like the Matrix. They tell us everything that's in the future timeline. The Matrix is going to really happen, and so is Hunger Games, and so is Terminator. These are things that are going to be expressed later during this epoch, which we call the Age of Aquarius. So they already know the timelines, and so they're telling us, because the inverted language of the media and entertainment has become the new form of oral tradition, because again, we're dealing with those who aggrandize the illusion of time and space. And
Mm.
they want people to fixate on only the material plane, because if you can know that you have a spirit that can do all these amazing things, you're not going to want to be attached to the metaverse. That they're
Okay, Ellen, I've got something here for you to work with, right? So we're talking about the containment in time space a lot, and the almost like the the Cartesian sequential linear time space model that we exist in. But there's another way of looking at things, right? So, have you ever heard of Rocco's basilisk?
Sounds
You
familiar.
have, if you haven't, and for the audience, if you haven't, Rocco's basilisk is a thought experiment that emerged in a forum back in 2010. And this thought experiment essentially is in the future, there will be a super advanced artificial intelligence and it will control humanity. However, this super advanced artificial intelligence that will be created in the future is retroactively affecting the past, ensuring its creation, kind of like a Terminator scenario that you outlined. However, because time and space is really an illusion, because our universe is more information based, therefore it is based around association, the basilisk has the ability to punish those that act against its creation and reward those that ensure its engendering its creation. And I think the more we work with computers, the more we reanalyze and reinterpret our existence as one based on association. So if you were to go on YouTube or go on Google and enter in something about aliens or enter in something about Saturn, it won't give you something related to time. It will give you something associated with your search. And again, that's how they're describing the basis of our universe. It also describes, for example, parapsychology or paranormal phenomena, say like synchronicity, or clairvoyance, precognition, because we have an association with these things that we can preconceive. Same with when you're synchronized with something, you're synchronized with something you're associated with, and so it transcends the 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 limitations of time and space, and it goes into even the notion that you were describing about artificial intelligence and how you have scenarios like the Matrix or the Terminator that will emerge. Um, encapsulates all that. What do you think about that? If you have
Well,
anything to say
essentially,
on that.
what you've just described is the Ouroboros that eats its tail. Essentially, the what it is the Ouroboros flattens the spiral of the wheel of time. The wheel of time is actually an ascending spiral or a descending spiral based on your free will choice to either choose dark or light path. And um, what you can do, though, again, with the great work of alchemy and what they teach in, the higher spiritual realms in Tibet and India, they're teaching you to not choose the dualistic perspective of the world, but to become centered and balanced and to see all things as yourself, and you are equal to all things. So that way you ascend quicker up the spiral. In Tibetan Book of the Dead, they actually suggest that before you die, you should be focused in seeing the white light as yourself and to be able to recognize it as yourself and your own projection of what you've experienced in your lifetime. And that on the moment of your death, once you see that white light, now you're going to know that it is you that has created this entire experience. And then that way it switches the game completely and you're out of the game. This
And
is what,
doesn't it also encourage you to avoid certain colors, certain portals, such as the
yes,
red
it
one, the
says
dark
that
one?
when you see the white light and you don't recognize it as yourself, then you're going to start seeing the different colors. And if
Mm.
you desire a different color, if you feel aligned with a specific color, you're going to incarnate as an animal, for example, if you desire the color green. Or if you see gold, then you'll start to incarnate as a god, what they call a god. There's all these other different things that you'll see. And it's all based on the 7 planets again. So going into alchemy, you can learn the chakras. The chakras are essentially connected to the 7 planetary bodies, which are the 7 rays of the visual light spectrum that we see. They are honored as the 7 days of the week, and they are also used in the spiritual alchemy practices of what they call magic or hermetics. And It just goes into the deeper esoteric information that we have lost due to the conquests. But yeah, that sounds like Ouroboros is that.
And the conquest that you're describing, when we were alluding earlier to the power of the Middle East or Islam in our world today and in the future, it, it makes me think of how the Anglo-American corporations and banking cartels, etc., they wanted to monopolize um, areas of the earth, such as like Saudi Arabia, which used to be known as the Hashemite Kingdom, and they overthrew the Hashemite um, monarchy and put in the family of the House of Saud in order to get the Anglo-American corporations and banks functioning and operating within that territory. And again, if you look back again with Europe, they did the same thing with Germany. And you can fast forward a little later, and they attempted to do the same thing with Russia. However, in Russia, they failed. And I'm sure you're aware of the role that the Bank of International Settlements had in basically funding the Reich, the Third Reich, and building it up in order for the Third Reich to become a military superpower that would engage smaller nation states and take their resources so that they can send that back to the Bank of International Settlements that would basically sort out the creditors that were funding the Reich, because as you know, Germany was in massive amounts of debts. So this was just a sort of plot to build up the German military industrial complex so these creditors could get their payback. And when when I think about the group that you're describing as the Dark Brotherhood, it's almost like they're trying to globally monopolize that, and it's like a cartel of corporations, but in a sense, they serve a metaphysical power that we are
Yes.
describing as Saturn that is saturating our consciousness with that systematic desire for mammon, for power, for wealth.
Yeah, because if you get involved with the story, the world story, then you lose yourself in the story, right?
I'm
But
already lost in that story. I just don't.
if you become spiritually aware, though, of the principles that we've been speaking of, that
Yes.
you enter a state of non-duality and you see everything as yourself. Again, like what Tibetan Book of the Dead is describing, that you're seeing and witnessing the chaos that is the story,
Mhm.
but you don't want to engage with chaos and then watch your world shift. The moment you stop engaging in other people's drama, other people's story,
Mhm.
all the chaos of the world, you go in and you silence the emotions, that desire to want to participate in the illusion that sucks us in.
Mhm.
Because essentially we're looking in a mirror. Remember this. What you see in others is nothing more than a reflection of yourself, because you're projecting your concepts on someone, because that's all we can do is project. But when we become, by centering and balancing our own field of energy and our own knowing inside of ourselves of who we are connected to all things, now you've just shifted the entire play of the world stage.
Mhm.
And this is what's happening with everybody collectively, because we co-create this reality. I'm going to tell you some weird little thing that happened to me. So I have horses and I have a small farm, and I was feeding my horses. I put water in their dry food, and I'm outside one day. This happened last year. I was outside and I was thinking about all the edible wild plants that are in my yard, but I hadn't seen this one particular plant called a lamb's ear. And I was like, wow, I wonder if I could find one out in the wild and plant it in my yard and maybe have it grow. Well, I'm using water. And I don't know if you've been watching the experiments with water and the consciousness that it holds and all of that, but about 3 to 4 months later, that plant that I thought about appeared right where I had those thoughts, and the water had splashed out on the ground. So my life has been a journey of subtle whispers about what this world truly entails and what it's really about. And on the inside, I have a greater knowing of what it's about. And this is why people can do amazing feats that seem mystical or, amazing. But once we start to align ourselves with these forces of light, and we negate all the chaos of the world, and we start working and honing our inner light, we can start shining outwardly with that light and affecting the fields of energy that are all around us. This is what Tibetan monks do. That's why they are in meditation all day. This is what some of the gurus in India can do. They don't show a lot of this stuff, but there was even a Chinese man, they called him Dynamo Jack. And he was in a documentary that I saw years ago where he was performing healing sessions on different people that had ailments. And this documentary group, this film group in the US, went out in search of this man because they had heard about him and they wanted to find him. Well, they eventually caught up with him. And he initially did not want to be on video. He didn't want to be public with it. But he had spoken with his spiritual master in his meditation. His spiritual master agreed that the knowledge is starting to be lost and that it needed to be taught to some people. So he agreed to be on camera. Well, they filmed this man performing healing abilities and even shocking people with his hands, lighting fires, and even putting a chopstick through a wooden table from the bottom up because it had a melamine top. But he had done all these abilities, and he said anybody can do these things. It took him 20 years of meditating and doing spiritual practices to be able to do some of those things.
Yeah. I mean, when you read we were talking about the Vedic literature, it's replete with stories of those who, you know, describe having those powers as a result of practicing, you know, certain types of yoga. You've got Raja yoga, you've got Hatha yoga. You got all these different types of yoga. And it really is thing of that union with God that is really beneficial if you want to harmonize your mind and your body with the with that positivity, with that higher power, and again to disengage from what you're saying, the drama. Because when you that having that ability to just silence your mind, and when thoughts come to the fore, just let them come and then quietly let them go. Don't get bogged down in the thought. Don't let them get you, sucked in. Just let it come and then let it go. And don't identify with your thoughts. Don't over identify with these thoughts. Just you're half the time you're not even consciously responsible for the things that you think of when we're talking about the power of hypnosis again. Subliminal messaging, suggestions, pervasive suggestions from the media, from your friends. It's everywhere, and just don't over identify.
Well, why do you...
Before because I'm going to need to kind of wrap this up soon. But see, before I do, I would like to put you on the hot seat and ask you just a handful of questions, and I'd like you to answer as quickly as you can.
Sure.
Okay. What is love?
Love is divine union with the all, it's divine consciousness. It's inside each of us. I think some of us, have a hard time tapping in sometimes.
What is a woman?
I'm sorry?
What is a woman?
What is a woman?
Yes.
A woman is just a half of what a man is. And a woman is a womb man, basically a man with a stargate.
Man with a stargate. I like that. I like that. A man with a Stargate.
Yeah.
I've never heard. Okay. Did we land on the moon?
No.
Yeah. I agree with you there. I don't see how the Saturn V rocket can do it 50, 60 odd years ago, yet we've not been able to repeat that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's ludicrous now, when we look at that stuff.
Flat Earth or globe Earth?
It's a plane. It's not a
Plane,
pancake.
so flat Earth.
It's not a pancake, but it's
So
it's
you're more that it's not a globe, it's a plane with a firmament.
yes. I mean, it's a
Right.
cosmic egg. If you know, it's been said around in ancient times. It's been around. All that information has been around for a very long time. We've been indoctrinated. Is what I feel.
And does a chicken have lips?
Chickens always have lips.
You have chickens.
I had them. I used to have chicken.
Right.
I mean, they
What
don't
do
have
you
they don't have like the movable lips and soft, can do all this kind of stuff. But I mean, it's the edge of the beak, it's like
mm,
lips.
it's fair. It's fair. Yeah. What do you have now? What animals do you have?
2 horses and 3 cats.
Three cats. This is the first episode, I've done in a long time where my cat didn't interfere.
Oh,
I've actually I call my cat the executive producer now because whenever I make an episode or even get on the phone, whenever I'm on the phone to someone, my cat likes to get involved and she starts meowing, and
you
I
know,
don't know why. It's interesting,
well,
but
cats are also guardians, I mean, they're very connected to the spirit. Actually, most animals are connected to the spiritual realm. We're the ones who are disconnected and don't believe.
I can believe that. But she's getting on. She's an old soul, so maybe that's why she likes sleeping. She likes sleeping now, So I guess that's what happens the older we get.
Yeah, kind of slow down, getting tired of Saturn's world, and we want to
I was
live.
about to say that I blame Saturn. I'm you, Saturn. Yeah.
I'm tired of time and space. Let's go back to where we won't be tired anymore.
Let's just integrate into a simulation, artificial intelligence, and create a matrix where we're young again and we've got all the powers of useful exuberance and
Oh, listen. I've got a hold of a formula for the elixir of life. I'm just going to leave that there. I study alchemy, so I'm like, let me try this because this sounds spot on, really.
well, listen, my show's called the Caledonian Elixir, so you got to tell me. You got to tell me that. Right. Well, Ellen, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. And if there's anything you want to tell us about, like promote or just let the audience know.
I'm not somebody who aggrandizes myself. Even though my channel says era of my ways, it's not about me. It's about we're going into some weird times. I'm Aquarius. We're going into the age of Aquarius. People are going to see things they've never seen before. And I'm just like, get ready, buckle up, Buttercup, because we're going for a ride.
I like that. I like how you say that buttercup. Very Georgian kind of
Yeah,
accent.
very southern.
Butter up, buttercup. Yeah. How is the weather in Georgia today anyway? Is it warm?
Yeah, it's been in the 70 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that is Celsius. Is that 40? I don't know what that is in
I
Celsius.
think it's more. I think 70 is more like upper 20s. Am I
Upper,
right? I
okay,
think.
I don't know. I mean, I don't really know. It's a very pleasant temperature. It's been a little kind of touching the 80s, but low 80s, and it's very dry right now. We haven't had rain in a bit, so things are starting to dry out.
Well, again, I hope you uh enjoy the weather and enjoy life in Georgia. And it's been pleasure, fun speaking to you.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Right. Well, maybe we can do it again sometime. We can invite others and
Oh yeah. Oh, just
yeah.
let me know. I'm good for a chat any day.
Mhm. Right. Well, again, thanks for coming on.
Okay, thank you.